Hey, it's Nicholas Thompson. I'm CEO of The Atlantic, and this is The Most Interesting Thing in AI, a podcast produced by Rethink, The Atlantic's creative marketing studio, in collaboration with PwC, a leader in helping organizations use AI. So I've talked a lot on this show about my passion for journalism, my passion for learning about AI, but I have this other passion, which is running. I have been a competitive runner for most of my life. I've just written a book about the sport. One of the things that is, of course, very important is that I have to track my performance and my recovery. It gets to matter even more as you become an older masters athlete, as I am. I've used a lot of different apps, I've worn different watches, I've tracked things in different ways. But one I've been wearing for a while and coming to rely on is called Whoop. It's a band you wear on your wrist, measures your resting heart rate, your sleep quality, gives you a recovery score. It's pretty useful for figuring out how much you're stressing your body. So the interesting question to me is, how much more useful could it get in the age of AI? Are there things that it can't measure now that it will be able to measure? Are there ways we'll be able to talk to it and it'll be able to coach us in a way that's helpful and not annoying? Can it help me improve my performance? So today's guest is the best person to talk me through that, the CEO and founder of Whoop, Will Ahmed. Today, Will joins me to discuss the level of insight that Whoop has on a person's health, especially in the age of AI. Here's my conversation with Will Ahmed. Will Ahmed, it's a pleasure to have you here on The Most Interesting Thing in AI.
Nick, thanks for having me.
So we're going to talk about Whoop. And first, I want you to kind of explain what it is. I've got one on right here. It's a black band. It's on my wrist. It looks like a watch without a watch face. And it's got this little green light that is going into my skin. Tell me what it's doing.
So at Whoop, we're on a mission to unlock human performance and health span. We want to make our members live longer and perform better. We build wearable technology that collects a lot of important information about the human body and your health. So it's a very comprehensive and deep understanding of the human body. You can really have a conversation about what you're trying to understand about your health and where you should take it.
Excellent. And now what is it literally doing?
To simplify it, Whoop is shining light underneath your skin, and that light has a frequency, and the frequency with which it reflects off of your blood and your capillaries firing, and then the frequency with which it returns to a photodiode can be interpreted to be your heart rate or your heart rate variability. And so when you're moving, that actually changes the blood flow. I mean, when I was first doing research in this space, we're now talking 13, 14, 15 years ago, a lot of the technology that Whoop is able to measure today came from, medical technology. If you wanted to understand heart rate variability, you needed to get hooked up to an electrocardiogram. And heart rate variability was this fascinating lens into recovery and into sleep. If you wanted to know how well you were sleeping, you'd need to go to a sleep lab and get hooked up to a PSG machine and all these, nodes that would get connected throughout your body, and human beings videotaping how you slept to give you scores. So we were able to take cumbersome and invasive and expensive, by the way, technology and put it into a much smaller form factor.
How do you measure sleep? Explain to me how shining this light into my skin and looking at the blood vessels can tell you when I am and when I'm not asleep and what stage of sleep I'm in.
So we measure your hours of sleep, which consists of the time you spend in bed actually sleeping. And then within hours of sleep, we also measure your restorative sleep, and that looks at the staging of sleep. Restorative sleep is really where all the magic happens, REM and slow wave sleep. REM sleep is when your mind is repairing. It's when you're having deep dreams. If you're someone who says, I can't remember my dream, or I don't think I have dreams, you're probably not getting enough REM sleep. And it's super important for cognitive function. Slow wave sleep is when your body produces about 95% of its human growth hormone. So people think they're going to get stronger in the gym or working out. You actually get stronger during slow wave sleep when your body's producing human growth hormone. You're breaking your muscles down when you exercise, you get stronger later when you repair them. And so over the years, we've done hundreds of thousands of sleep studies where we've been able to have people go to a sleep laboratory and then also wear a variety of Whoop sensors. And we've been able to look at a lot of the different physiological readouts to then create an algorithm that, using the same physiology, can map back to well, was that light sleep or
Mm-hmm.
was that REM sleep? Was that REM sleep or was that slow wave sleep? Was the person awake or were they asleep? Even sleep disturbances. That's another thing that Whoop measures.
So you have a whole bunch of people wear sensors, and then you strap them up to really complicated stuff in a sleep lab, and then you measure the states on the sleep lab and then track that back to how the blood vessels are dilating?
It's close. Essentially, we're able to map, let's say, your movement across 9 different axes, your heart rate variability, your temperature, your pulse ox, all these
Oh,
different
I see.
physiological and raw data points, and then interpret those to be your stages of sleep or to be time in bed versus, time awake, right? And so it's a very complex, actually, form of machine learning that determines what ultimately is the right output for slow wave sleep. And
Oh, that's super interesting. So you're not really looking at my wrist and saying, are you asleep? You're looking at my wrist, getting 26 data points, putting them through some kind of a magic box, and then the magic box tells you whether I'm asleep or not.
correct.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's cool. One of the things that Whoop measures is heart rate variability. Tell me what that is.
Heart rate variability is the amount of time between successive beats of the heart. So if your heart is beating at 60 beats per minute, it's not beating every second. This is counterintuitive, but your heart would be beating at, say, 1.2 seconds, and then 0.8 seconds, and then 0.7 seconds, and then 1.3 seconds. And that time between successive beats of the heart being of different durations, the variability, is a good thing. And the reason for that is heart rate variability is this lens into your autonomic nervous system. So your autonomic nervous system consists of sympathetic and parasympathetic activity. Sympathetic is activation. So heart rate up, blood pressure up, respiration up. If you're stressed, all of those things will trigger a sympathetic response. Parasympathetic is all the opposite. Heart rate down, blood pressure down, respiration down. Parasympathetic is what helps you fall asleep. And this is constantly working in the background with you totally unconscious of it. So even just when you inhale, that's sympathetic. That's made my heart rate go up. Exhale, that's parasympathetic. That's made my heart rate go down. And heart rate variability being higher is a sign that sympathetic and parasympathetic are balanced. And you want them to be balanced. It's sensitive in the sense that if you measured it right before this podcast versus right this moment in the middle of the podcast versus at the end, I might have 3 completely different readings.
Mine got much better when you breathed in and out just 30 seconds ago. I got to tell you that.
Yeah, there is an element to that. So breathing, one of the cool things about heart rate variability in the autonomic nervous system in general is how much you can control it. It's called autonomic control. Many of the world's best athletes and performers actually will practice autonomic control, which is to say, okay, you're in a state of stress. How do you immediately drop into a state of calm?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a technique which involves inhaling for a shorter number of seconds than you exhale. We have a stress monitor in the app that's largely looking at your heart rate variability, and it's able to determine in any given moment how stressed are you relative to your baseline.
Mm-hmm.
The recovery metric, which is 0 to 100% red, yellow, green, is probably one of the single most innovative things that Whoop brought to market. Whoop was the first company to quantify recovery, which is how we had so much success initially with athletes.
What are the things that you cannot measure now, but that you think you'll be able to measure in the next few years, either because the sensors get better or the capacity to use math to understand weak signals gets better?
Well, in general, I think the right place to look is what has historically been measured in a doctor's office with antiquated, cumbersome technology. 12 years ago, it was thought unlikely that we could even measure heart rate variability from the wrist. And, now today we're able to do blood pressure very accurately. Like that just seemed impossible 12 years ago. So, there's obvious different types of technology that just today seem like they're in a cumbersome form factor. And I think one that a lot of people are looking at is CGMs, which is continuous glucose monitor. And I can almost guarantee that those types of things will be much more easily measured by Whoop
So you think you'd be able to measure glucose? Will you be able to measure like focus, like moments of high concentration?
So in the context of measuring focus, one way to think about that is that you are literally measuring brain waves and measuring areas of the brain that light up when you're focused. And so that would be very specifically you are measuring focus. Another way to think about that question is you're able to triangulate focus through a variety of other metrics. And they would involve a variety of physiological things, and maybe they would also involve the importing of data from other places. So, for example, let's say you had your email and your calendar and your Whoop data all kind of under one umbrella. Well, I can almost guarantee you we could start triangulating productivity and focus. I mean, this is what's so powerful about AI today is just you have these multimodal models that are able to understand all sorts of different types of data over long periods of time. And then couple that with really strong memory, which is that it can remember a lot of information about you and pull that information to create context. The level of insight that comes from that is quite profound.
What about measuring like happiness? Presumably you could do something similar to what you did with sleep, right? Which is figure out the signals in the blood and, relate it to HRV and all the other new things you'll be able to monitor in the future. Could you measure like happiness/depression?
We have what's called the Whoop Journal for people who aren't familiar, but it allows Whoop members to input all sorts of different information about themselves. And this can include supplements they might be taking, behavioral decisions like, did I drink alcohol last night? Did I share my bed? So on and so forth. But one of the categories is around mood. And so we actually have a lot of people reporting their mood every day and how happy they are every day. One of the things I hear most from people on Whoop is how quickly it made them dial back their drinking. And if you've never worn Whoop, one thing you realize from wearing it is that even just like one drink or two drinks just dramatically changes your physiological profile the next day. And so I've met a lot of people who have quit drinking alcohol because of it, or just really dialed back their drinking. And so we've already actually built a pretty interesting data set there. And it's a little early for me to say the results of that. But again, when you can take a data set like that otherwise would be kind of abstract, and then you can layer it in with 24/7 physiological data, and we're about to add blood work, which is going to be its own fascinating data set, you can start to really create an interesting picture of what's going on.
Wow, that's wild, right? It's not like they've written down in a journal, my resting heart rate was 45 and I was happy. You actually know what their resting heart rate was and whether they said they were happy or not. And so you can sort of work backwards and figure out which data signals, and it may not be HRV, it may not be resting heart rate, it may be body temperature, right? It may be something else that you're measuring. It may have something to do with all kinds of factors that tie into it.
Yeah, I mean, there's very simple analyses, which could be like, Nick, you're happiest when you get over 6 hours and 45 minutes of sleep and you're in New York and you haven't drank alcohol for 3 days.
Right.
Okay, like that would be one like personalized formula for Nick. But you can also think about it at a population level. We came out with one of the largest studies ever on exercise and sleep. And we were able to show that up to 4 hours prior to someone sleeping, every hour that they exercised closer to their bedtime disrupted their sleep. And then on top of that, the rigorousness of the exercise within each of those categories disrupted the sleep. And so we could literally quantify just how disrupted your sleep will be depending on how hard your workout is and when you exercised relative to your bedtime. And it was really the first time that a company or a research lab has quantified that. But it was quite profound, where if you exercise hard within 3 or 4 hours of sleep, like you're going to have a significantly worse quality of sleep. Now, imagine a similar analysis like that with mood or with blood work and physiology or so on and so forth.
And tell me, all the advances in AI, how much do they matter to you, right? I mean, you're benefiting from smaller sensors, better battery life, but are you actually benefiting from AI as we think about it, generative AI, or are you just benefiting from the rest of the tech revolution?
There's no question that the advances in reasoning and explainability and memory are huge tailwinds for Whoop and a company like Whoop that has a unique and large data set. I mean, by being able to take all of this health data and then add in all of these other contextual pieces of data like who you are and what you've told us, and then add in a different type of data, say like your blood work, and then add in, fill in the blank, maybe it's your calendar or your travel schedule or whatever. Like, to be able to make sense of all of that in one place is something that really only recently was possible.
Yeah.
And so that's very, very exciting. And then the second piece of it, of course, is to have the interface to engage with it. So it's one thing to then, be able to come up with powerful quantifications of this information, but then the fact that you can have a conversation with that data and feel like you're talking to a really smart human being, that is quite profound. Where this is all going is, I think, inevitably that human beings will be able to live much longer.
I mean, I have taken my Whoop data and I've put it into Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini and asked it questions, right? Like, tell me why the HRV is doing this at this particular time. Are you going to build that kind of conversational feature into the Whoop product itself?
Absolutely. And actually, the initial stages of this exist in the Whoop app today. I mean, you can go into the Whoop app today and you'll be able to interact with the latest OpenAI model that we've also added additional context to and rules to understand your health data.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I ask Will about how he balances the personalization of Whoop with concerns about privacy. Let's talk a little bit about the privacy implications, because I kind of love the thought that you can integrate the Whoop data with my Google Calendar, right? And then you'll figure out exactly where I am and my work schedule and what meetings stress me out and which ones don't. How do you do that as you start to think about integrating with other companies?
One thing that we're really obsessed with is keeping data within the four walls of Whoop.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, even our partnership with ChatGPT, the Whoop data actually never leaves our four walls. We'll send over sort of holes in your personal information so that it becomes unidentifiable. And that includes a lot of your physiological data. We also have a policy with ChatGPT where they can't retain any of the information that people are asking or saying. So they can't sort of train on top of your conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's like one example of one partnership. In other cases where Whoop members want their Whoop data to go somewhere, then we just have to be very clear with them about what's happening. And so let's say you want your Whoop data to show up in your Strava app or, fill in the blank other app that you use. Then we would just be very clear about what information is leaving Whoop to make that possible. We also allow our members to delete their data, and we also allow members to export their data. We also are very clear that we don't sell your data. So you are not the product. The product is the membership. And I think that's in direct contrast to what a lot of big tech companies have done over the years.
Oh, totally. Like, your data is super valuable. You could have had a side hustle selling it off to healthcare companies and skipped a financing round or two.
Correct. And we haven't done that.
So tell me, you mentioned earlier about integrating blood work into Whoop. What do you mean by that? Do you mean that, like, I go to the doctor or I go to Quest, I get my blood scores, and then I import them into Whoop? Or do you mean that you would somehow be doing the blood work yourselves?
So you'll be able to upload all past blood tests into Whoop, and Whoop will then visualize them over time. So if you've ever wondered like how your iron levels or your testosterone levels or vitamin B, D, C, whatever, if you've ever wondered how those have evolved over time, you'll now have them all in one place where you can see their trends, and Whoop will show whether they're within optimal range or sufficient range or whether they're out of range. And you can also then ask Whoop about certain biomarkers relative to the Whoop data of that period. So let's say that you were iron deficient a year ago and you were on Whoop. Whoop could look at, well, could that have been caused by your diet or by your exercise habits then, or your sleep habits, or some of the things you were reporting in the Whoop journal, like your alcohol consumption or whatever. But it can start to create a story around why something might be the case.
And then presumably you could run it in reverse too, right? If you could figure out before I get my iron levels tested the next time, you could see whatever the patterns were in the Whoop app and you could suggest to me, hey, Nick, you should probably get your iron tested.
Absolutely. I mean, this is also where the population level data gets so powerful because there's probably, 200,000 people on Whoop who look just like you.
Right.
Right. And same age, same, exercise habits, sleep habits, live in the same city or a major city. And we're going to learn a lot by being able to look at that many people and then give that insight to you to say, hey, this is what we've seen with other people who are iron deficient or, again, fill in the blank. And then the second piece is that we're actually going to offer blood testing. So you're going to be able to book blood tests through Whoop and they'll have a clinical review from a doctor. And it's done in partnership with Quest, which is the biggest lab provider in the country.
Okay, so one of the things that interests me about your company is that you made a bunch of really important decisions along the way to stay focused, right? You don't have all this other stuff, right? You are like fundamentally different from the Apple Watch. You've stayed very, very focused. But the world you're talking about is one in which Whoop becomes a lot more. So how do you keep the core of your product focused while also doing blood tests and integrated with Google Calendar?
Well, it all needs to come back to this mission of unlocking human performance and health span. And even health span was a recent addition to that mission. We realized that our members and a growing percentage of our members wanted to live longer. They wanted to live healthier. And that was something that we could do. And we partnered with Dr. Eric Verdin and the Buck Institute, which is the leading longevity institute in the United States, and developed a lot of capabilities and functionality around understanding someone's health span, which is to say how old their physiology and biology reflects versus their chronological age. And obviously that's something you want to be younger than your chronological age. And a lot of how we make decisions is the work in service of that mission, or is it a distraction from that mission? So the question of should Whoop have a screen and should it tell you your emails and whether you're getting a phone call, that feels like a distraction from this core question of unlocking health span.
I see.
And making someone live longer. But blood work, on the other hand, turned out was a really important metric or set of metrics and could provide a really rich set of information to help you understand your health and help someone perform better and live longer. So it became obvious that we should do it.
Tell me about the health span metric, how you measure that. And does anybody's biological age on their Whoop, is that more than their biological age? Because you must have rigged it so everybody seems a little bit younger, else they'd hate their Whoops.
So believe it or not, roughly 55% of people are younger and 45% of people are older.
Wow, I would have guessed it was more like 90-10, that you guys had cooked it somehow.
We have not rigged it. And Whoop members are generally probably more healthy than you would expect. So we did not rig it. It's a very challenging metric, but that gives it some authenticity, which is to say if you're getting younger on Whoop, you are doing the right things.
One of the most interesting debates in ultra running and sort of intense endurance sports is whether there's a limit to how much you can do before it stops being good for you. And that if you run, more than 300-mile races in a year or more than like 50 marathons, you eventually start to do damage and you live less long. A, do you have a theory on this? B, have you seen anything in the aggregate Whoop data that suggests it's true? And C, if not, when will we know?
I have less data specifically on the ultra marathon question, but I can give you a couple other things to think about in this conversation. So the first is that we do sometimes see a gap between performance and health, which is to say that driving for a performance outcome is not always the healthiest pursuit. And some sports are very obvious, like, boxing and football. you might be extremely fit for an event, but the performance of that event may put pressure on the body that is not necessarily healthy. And we've been able to even show that there's a correlation between concussions and heart rate variability, for example, where if you have concussions, your heart rate variability will be suppressed for some period of time. There's also a notion of doing an ultra marathon or even a marathon if you're someone who's not fit for that event, where the performance can push the body to a place that is so hard and grueling for the body that in the weeks or two that follow, your body might be showing meaningful signs of overtraining, which is different than overreaching. Overreaching tends to be you push your body just far enough that you're getting fitter. Overtraining is where your body goes so far that it can't come back. It can't bounce back fast. And your body essentially has all the feelings of someone with a sickness without the symptoms of being sick. So your body's run down and has an elevated resting heart rate, and your sleep quality is disrupted. You're tired all the time. So anyway, that's sort of a general point, which is that performance and health aren't always the same thing. When it pertains to sleep, we actually do have this notion of too much sleep hurting your age. If you get on average over 9 or 10 hours of sleep, that'll actually be negatively impacting your whoop age, because it turns out that people who are getting that many hours of sleep in the literature tend to have some form of chronic disease. And that chronic disease, of course, is going to impact overall longevity. So the research shows that 8 hours is great, 8 up to 9 hours is probably good, but there's a tipping point somewhere around 9 hours where if you're getting more than that, it's actually a sign that there might be some other negative factor going on, which in turn indicates that it's not good for your health span.
Huh. Okay. Tell me, what is Whoop going to look like in, say, 5 years? Is it still going to be a black band around my wrist? Or am I going to have like a number of sensors around my body?
Well, I think what you know to be Whoop, you'll probably associate a little bit less with specifically hardware, because that question was framed largely around the wearable. And I think that Whoop over time will feel much more like this 24/7 coach doctor that incorporates your wearable data, but also incorporates a lot of other pieces of data and becomes this reliable, trusted partner for you to understand what's next in your health. You know, there's a lot of areas of AI where I find the future is more unknown, or I'm even, call it, a little nervous about what the societal implications will be. But I think that this idea of a health operating system and having AI sit across everything about your health is so exciting. It's like, it's going to be such a game changer for what it means for preventative health. And if you look at this country, healthcare costs have continued to rise, life expectancy's declined, and there's just this general feeling, I think, that you're not really getting what you paid for, and you're not getting great treatment. It's more like sick care than healthcare. And what's exciting about having a health operating system where all of this information's under one umbrella and you have this very intelligent AI that sits on top of it is it'll feel preventative. And so many things about the way the system exists today, I think won't exist in the future. You know, for example, I think the annual checkup will go away. Like the idea that on just some random day of the year, you go see a doctor and they like measure 5 things that should all be measured non-invasively all the time. And they ask you some random questions. Like that's an incredibly antiquated and bizarre experience.
It seems so weird when I go to my GP. It's like, okay, let me take your pulse, and like puts his hand on my wrist. I'm like, dude, I've got like A, I've got an Apple Watch. B, I've got a Whoop. C, I've got like the sensor on my arm, right? It's been taken 5,000 times yesterday.
So it's going to get much more preventative and much more intelligent. And the day that you go see a doctor will be because you have a real problem or there's something to do or you're getting surgery. And that just, even that one piece of the equation just being as simple as I described would reduce a lot of costs and make it a lot better. And I think that it's going to democratize health and well-being, where today, you know, the smartphone that you have in your pocket doesn't really depend on your wealth. Right? That's become a ubiquitous public good, if you will, is the smartphone, because it got to a certain capability and a certain cost where it was accessible for all. And I think we're going to see the same thing happen within health.
We have a question we ask all of our guests. What is the most interesting or surprising way that you yourself have used AI recently?
Well, I'll say this. I've had blood tests for, the last 5 years that have kind of lived in all these different places. And I'm testing this new feature that we're about to roll out, which is called Advanced Labs. And one of the things I can now do is upload all of my blood tests. And so I uploaded all of my blood tests. And then I started asking the Whoop Coach, which is our AI that sits within the app, about my Whoop data relative to my blood tests. And there were certain things that I thought were caused from a lack of supplementation. And once the Whoop data was able to be integrated with it, it actually turned out, I was just like really stressed in the period of time that I took this test, or I was, training really hard, or I was traveling too much, and so it just provided a lens of insight for me that felt like a little bit of a victory, in the sense that it was like, oh wow, when you put all this data together, like you really start to understand what's going on. And so that for me, that was a powerful AI moment.
Cool. Well, I look forward to being able to do that myself once I'm fully in the advanced labs of Whoop. So thank you so much, Will Ahmed.
Thank you, Nick.
This has been The Most Interesting Thing in AI. I'm Nicholas Thompson. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, please rate and review this on the podcast platform of your choice. Your feedback helps us determine future episodes and guests. And please make sure to hit the follow button so you can be alerted of future episodes. Next week, I'll be joined by Matt Wood, PwC's Global and U.S. Commercial Technology and Innovation Officer, to discuss how the company is helping its partners adapt to an AI-powered workplace.